everybody, hello everybody, hello everybody, hello everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Hello everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you like Therian and furry content, as well as arts and crafts, you are in the right place. Make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my channel if you like this kind of content, and let's get on with the video. Now, the topic of this video is personally the most complicated topic that I've seen come up in the Therian community in a while. So this has a lot of nuance, a lot of complicated things, and a lot of people angry at me. So let's talk about it. If you haven't guessed by the title of this video, the topic of today is physical Therians. Now, this topic has come up a lot recently, especially for physical Therians, because they have been feeling excluded by the rest of the community, which makes sense. See, every time I see a physical Therian video, I get a bunch of comments being like, Therianthropy can't be physical, and you're kind of right, but not about what a physical Therian actually means. See, while Therianthropy can't be physical in a biological sense, that doesn't mean it can't be physical in a sense of self and identity. And while all Therians identify as non-human, physical Therians have their identity cross into the physical plane. So what does this mean? Well, it can mean a lot of things, especially because Therianthropy is different for each individual. So how do we go about defining physical Therian? Personally, I don't think we should really define or limit things in such a fine-tooth comb sort of way. I think more so if you feel like you are a physical Therian, then identifying as a physical Therian is for you. But here's some examples of things that might make you a physical Therian. First, viewing your physical self as an animal. A common example of this is because a Therian identifies as their stereotype on the inside, then the body they're in must belong to that stereotype. Sort of like saying, I am a mountain lion, so I must be out here too. Another really common way to be a physical Therian is to be in a shift at all times. Some Therians just can't stop being in a shift. So if you're in a shift at all times, which is to say you feel like your stereotype at all times, then your body must be that stereotype. Because if you feel like an animal every single second of your life, I mean, it's kind of silly to be like, yeah, you're a human. You know what I mean? Because yes, you have a biological human body. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't feeling like an animal every second. So that disconnect can kind of be complicated. I've seen time and time again people being like, well, physical Therians are delusional. First of all, even if they were, they're still worthy of our help and appreciation, right? Second, I have a brilliant explanation for why Therianthropy is not a mental illness. If a person's symptoms of Therianthropy are not causing any harm, if they are not causing the person to do awful things or dangerous things, if they are not causing the person to, I don't know, hurt other people, then really what's the problem with identifying as an animal? If the individual identifying as an animal is unharmed by this reality they're in, if they are unharmed by being shifted at all times, and that doesn't bother them and it doesn't cause actual harm, then no, it's not a mental illness and doesn't have to be treated like one. Now, some Therians are delusional. Their Therianthropy is a part of their delusion. This is where it gets complicated because it's very situational. It depends on the individual. Because if the individual is experiencing a lot of harm and they're causing harm in their life, in their family, I mean, if they are suffering from their delusions, then it's a problem. But if the delusion is not interfering with their daily life, if it's not causing them to be sad, depressed, anxious, angry, if it's not causing any negative symptoms, then we don't really need to do anything. Now, that does not mean that if you are experiencing negative symptoms of your Therianthropy that you should ignore it. In fact, if you are experiencing negative symptoms of your Therianthropy, if your shifts scare you, like a lot, if you are experiencing distress from being a Therian, that is where you kind of have to bring in a mental health professional. See, there's only so much you can do on your own, and it's really a good thing to bring in someone who has an expert opinion, especially if you're confused about your Therianthropy. Like, is it a delusion? Is it Therianthropy? It's best to check with a professional. Again, that's only if you are being harmed by your Therianthropy or if there is some reason to check with a professional, then obviously that's a really good idea. See, I struggle with my mental health a lot. In fact, I have dissociative identity disorder plus a lot of other conditions. I have been through this. And just know that you are not alone, and you're probably not the only Therian who feels that way. But on the same mental health topic, another thing that gets brought up a lot when I talk about physical Therians is clinical lycanthropy. Now, first of all, clinical lycanthropy is not a diagnosis that really anyone would receive anymore. It's very rare to be diagnosed in the first place. You're way more likely to get a diagnosis of something such as schizophrenia. But clinical lycanthropy is the experience of where you are delusionally thinking that you are turning into an animal. This is different from Therianthropy because, again, this is a mental illness. It causes harm to the individual. Therianthropy, on the other hand, even physical Therianthropy, does not cause harm. So it is not a mental illness, and it is not clinical lycanthropy. Lastly, a lot of people like to bring up the fact that adding physical Therians to the definition changes the definition of Therianthropy and changes its history. Now, I'd just like to make it clear that physical Therians have been around since the start of the Therian community. In fact, they've been around a lot longer. The thing is, we just didn't have the terms we have now. See, language does change over time, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But in this case, it's just the language that has changed. Physical Therians have always been a part of this community and always will. See, physical therianthropy is just a label to describe a certain type of Therian experience. If you don't have that experience, then you're not a physical Therian. If you do, then you are. It's not really changing history because these identities have existed since the Therian community has started and long before. They just hadn't had the terminology. They weren't called physical Therians then, but if they were, they'd be the same thing. There are a couple things I wanted to add in post upon editing this video, so here's this. First, the two examples I gave of being a physical Therian are not the only ways to experience physical therianthropy. They're just two examples. There are so many different ways to be a physical Therian that I couldn't really include all of them, so those are two of the most common experiences. But again, there are way different ways to be a physical Therian. And second, on the topic of changing Therian history, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to add more labels to be more inclusive. I think inclusivity is a really good thing, and if we're adding more labels to include physical Therians better, I don't think that's a bad thing. See, physical Therians, again, have existed since the start and even before our community was labeled Therian. So I don't think adding the label physical Therian, especially because we're trying to be more inclusive of them, is really a bad thing or changing Therian history at all. I think it's really good, honestly. So there you have it. There is a video all about physical Therians, and hopefully you got some good information out of it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and any more information on physical Therians, if you are a physical Therian and would like to share your experience, let us know in the comments. But in the end, yes, physical Therians are valid, and it is literally just another label to describe a certain therianthropic experience. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to my channel. It helps me out a lot. If you like Therian and furry content, I post pretty much every single day, so check out my page. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.